I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off, even when grieving in mourning the end of the Knicks' incredible season. Andrew Kuo, how are you on this dreary post-Knicks season after?
Fucking glorious, man. It's a new day in New York. Everything's back open. Even though the cookies, said COVID would ended months ago. This is a new day in New York. The Knicks are good. Apparently there's a team over the bridge somewhere that's still in the playoffs. We had meaningful basketball at the Garden. People were buzzing, even though they were Derek Jeter fans. I'll still take it. New York is back, baby. Did you get caught up in any of the hoopla?
Well, I'm always caught up in the hoopla. If there's one thing I am, it's caught up in hoopla. And in the pageantry, in the flim-flammery, in the pomp. I am waist deep in pomp at all times. I think the city is coming back to life. We know that we had the lowest, what's the word? The lowest positivity rate since the pandy began back in last March. So we'll get more to the Knicks later. I think normalcy is returning. And
Everywhere.
Everywhere. I mean, I was upstate visiting family, and they're a little ahead of New York in terms of normalcy.
I gotta ask, did you catch a garbage plate?
We drove by Nick Tahoe's, the famous garbage plate emporium in Rochester.
And they
were closed.
There?
They were closed. I don't know if they are permanently closed, temporarily closed, were just closed when we happened to drive by, but they were definitely not open at that juncture.
Do they open at like 3 a.m. to 5 a.m.? Or is it something... Can you enjoy... Maybe I've asked this. Can you enjoy a garbage plate throughout your day?
I never have. I suppose it's conceivable that you could go there for lunch and have a garbage plate.
Like a healthy garbage plate.
I've
like
only
with
had
some
them...
tofu.
There's no such thing. Not if it's a real one. I've only had them after having an beer at, post midnight.
Right, like 3/4 of the way through N beer, you're really craving those tofu dogs and, vegan mac and cheese.
It's not the way we roll in upstate New York. But, they're supermarkets, Starbucks, you name it. It's kind of like masks are optional. I was like, okay, all right, they're pushing the ball forward over here. New York is getting there. I think as of last Monday, a couple days ago, the curfew has ended for everyone. And I just saw the other night, it was late, like bars were still open. But there's an interesting article in, I want to say it was in New York Magazine, about maybe it was Eater, I could be wrong, about how places like Katz Deli and Veselka are trying to sort out when they'll come back to being like a 24-hour dining establishment.
Yeah, man. The thing I worry about, I always worry about nonsense, but this is like actually real because before COVID kind of exposed some cracks, right, in the dam a little bit, and what a fine line it is, even for successful restaurants, to walk just in a normal situation where you can dictate your own hours and serve people like normal. Like it's a small margin, similar to basketball in the playoffs. But when something like the pandy happens, it really exposes how vulnerable this whole ecosystem is. And I'm not sure we did anything to address it. I don't know if there is a way to solve it. They might be like, the lawmakers might be like, if this happens again, we know what to do faster and quicker and better. But in the meantime, you just have to tread your own water. But it doesn't feel like the restaurant people I've talked to have much confidence moving forward. They're glad, they're relieved, but the same problems loom, right?
It's hard to say. I think there are built-in problems with the restaurant industry that you mentioned. That there are slim margins, and those are made even more slim by things like explosive New York City rents. So maybe if
And
something
minimum wage and healthcare.
right.
Allegedly, yeah.
But I think maybe we're in a position of correction in terms of commercial real estate where that built-in expense changes, and then in that case the math changes, because we've seen this happening in the restaurant world a lot. Is people aren't going back and working bad jobs, like they're just not doing it
In
And
all
the-
sectors, yeah.
in all sectors, but especially in New York City specifically. In the restaurant world, it's hard to get staffing these days because it's a shit job, and people do it out of passion. A lot of people do it because they were pursuing other dreams, acting, Broadway, music, and then worked at restaurants.
Podcasting, interning at
Podcasting.
cookies, yeah.
Yeah, like eating gruel,
Less.
less of it. But those people aren't here right now. People who are willing to take bad jobs with more malleable hours aren't around. And honestly, a lot of people died. Like the restaurant, like the people who worked back of house, the cooks, they were the ones who got disproportionately sick and died of COVID.
And
So
their
there are-
families, and they moved away, right? Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think there are realities that are going to affect how quickly the restaurant ecosystem rebuilds. But to your point, it was a bit sickly to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. And, without getting into ideological debate about what the government should and should not do, I just want our city to kind of recover for real and like rebuild for real. We always talk about that in basketball, right? It's like, just don't add a superstar, don't change your, don't have a signature play-in jersey for sale to drum up enthusiasm. Like, really fix this thing, because it went through the ringer. And I asked one of my friends who had to shut down, a couple of my friends who had to shut down their spots during COVID after holding on for like 10 months, if they had seen any opportunities to scoop up one of these allegedly affordable brick and mortar places. And he's like, not really. Like the cheap ones are the ones you don't want.
Right.
And the good ones, they're holding out because they're waiting. They'll take, he's assuming they'll take anybody, whether it's a Chase Bank or like your favorite old-timey bar number 2, but they're willing to wait it out in ways that he was disappointed by.
Well, I think that was explained to me finally why that occurred in, I don't know if it was an article I read or what it was, maybe last year. And I had been totally unaware that the way that buildings are valued, they take into account what the rent is for like lower floors, commercial spaces. So you're better off having a vacant space and preserving the valuation of that building based on the rent you're asking or what a previous tenant was paying than renting it out for less, which then in turn would affect the entire value of the property. So people are willing to like eat that monthly loss to maintain like a higher value. And once that was made clear to me, I'm not saying I explained it the best way, but
This is just cap space on a basketball team.
yeah, that's a pretty good analog. But
Yeah.
once I understood that was happening and it was a property value thing and not an income issue,
Yeah.
I kind of understood why there's all these vacant storefronts, and maybe there's a way to change that legally. I don't know. I'm not a real estate expert, but that did sort of crystallize why this is an enduring problem.
One of my favorite websites, which I always bring up, is Celebrity Net Worth. And I was looking up Hugo from the Neptunes just to check in. I heard they're getting back together, and I was like, what is this Asian king doing? Is he good? A lot of surprising stuff. He's worth a lot more money than I thought he was, but I shouldn't be surprised because he's made hits. And but he's a lot older than I thought he was too. And but back to your point, like the evaluation of it, like what do I think something's worth, whether it be a celebrity or a stock that has an IPO, you know? And we found out, like, I always ask myself, like, what did we learn from COVID? You know, like, what are our lessons? And sometimes I'm like, oh, we just learned what fungible means, because we all had to read one article about NFTs in order to mansplain NFTs to someone else. But the takeaway with NFTs that I thought was funny was just like, yeah, well, the dollar has no value, but Ethereum has no value either. It's all applied to it. And, you know, applied value is actual value. And it's kind of what you're talking about with these buildings. It is the idea of the worth of it that makes it what it is. And if you collect a bunch of aging veterans on your team, the valuation goes down.
People have already said that the NFT bubble has completely popped, and I don't know if that's true. I haven't been, I am aware of the phenomenon, and we've talked about it on the show. Mm-hmm. I'm not entrenched enough in that world to know if there are, strong underlying signs that this will be something that remains a cash cow or a principle of new investing going forward. Maybe it totally will. But people are saying, oh yeah, the NFT shit is already kind of over.
I feel like those are like doom mongers. I think the bump in NFTs was my favorite when Paris Hilton was like, I kind of created NFTs. And she created a lot, but she, I think, had gotten her feet wet years ago. And was like, oh, I started this whole trend. I'm like, fine. Yes, you did. But I think the real point is the bubble on crypto might be bigger or smaller depending on how you frame it, but it is the value of Ethereum or Bitcoin that kind of tanked like the excitement for NFTs. But they're not going anywhere. People, like 10 years from now, someone's going to release an NFT. It might not just go for $69 million,
Right.
And that was only one person that was purchased by an NFT company. Are you on your motorcycle right now, peeling out?
I'm potting from a sidecar, and I'm being driven around Rochester, New York, by a hog.
Which basketball team has that Harley Davidson logo on their jersey? Is that Oklahoma City? I forget.
I forget, but one does.
Yeah.
So one other thing that came back in the news cycle here. Rochester, New York. No, just joking. That's always a cookies topic. Williamsburg, back in the news.
Same difference.
Same thing. Yeah.
They have garbage plates.
So this guy, I think he's a writer, I guess BuzzFeed News. Joe Bernstein put up a tweet yesterday that got some traction.
Confusing.
In our segment of the Twitter universe.
A little corner.
Williamsburg is so insane now. It's crystallized into pure decadence. Millennials who have doubled down on 2015. Creative director energy so strong it makes my eyes water.
There's a lot to unpack, man.
I'm trying to really understand what the pure decadence element is. And like the insanity element. Are we talking about what does that entail?
I mean, it's a delicious piece of a morsel of bait, right? Like you mentioned Williamsburg, and people jump up to get beat down, right? And like
creative directors, we don't like them.
Yeah, like since when don't we like creative directors?
I mean, but creative directors, that's become the
a code for something else.
Right, a code for like a worthless clout demon professional, sort of.
So weird.
Like someone who doesn't really do anything, like, but kind of tells that like wears like kith.
Right, it's like the restaurant manager, not the cook or the person who washes dishes.
Yeah, what was the old euphemism for that? I feel like it used to be like, oh, they claim they're like a manager or they're an agent or they're a photographer or a designer, and then it became a creative director. It became shorthand for kind of being a auxiliary cog in an industry that doesn't really need you, but you've inserted yourself into music or art or design or fashion or any sort of culture while not really contributing to it.
Yeah, and I think that is the intent of that accusation, but it is a Instagram thing, right? This is kind of a jab to kind of the last decade of influencers on Instagram being like, you guys think you're all creative directors and you're all making money on this, but you're not doing anything. And I'm like, well, they're doing a lot. Like, I don't know, 2 million people checking out like what sneakers you're wearing is like legit. I want to see, what are you wearing? Ooh, Hoka's, nice. But
Right,
like,
and I think you're correct, and it worked both ways. It was people who had figured out a way to get money off of corporations by being a quote creative director,
Yeah.
and then also people who used it who weren't doing anything at all. Like it was both of those things. It was like an aspirational position of, yes, I'm a creative director for LVMH. Like, oh, that's a thing, and someone else is like, I'm a creative director. You're like, for what? Just a
Yeah.
creative director.
I remember decades ago, I was in a fast food restaurant, maybe when the internet was coming up, a fast food restaurant on Canal Street, and some middle-aged man was having a shouting match with the manager at this restaurant, and the manager wouldn't let him use the bathroom without buying something, and the guy's like, I have a like Mercedes, I forget what car. It's like, I have a Mercedes Benz outside. I'm a CEO of a company. Do you think I'm the person you need to keep out of your bathroom? I find that humiliating. And the guy was just like, it's just policy. I could get fired. Like I can get in trouble, by the owner of the restaurant. And I thought it was so sad because everyone there is right. Like this guy probably there's two CEOs of Cookies Hoops, right? And there's a sense of there's a sense of pride there. Like, I don't know what kind of business he does, but like he was throwing around this title to kind of sun this manager who was like toiling away at this fast food restaurant. And I was like, this is a really kind of dark point of view. But he's also not wrong. It's just the bathroom.
This is what we've seen forever in nightlife, where someone
yeah.
comes up and is like, I want to get into this club. And the doorman or bouncer is like, nah, you're not coming in. Like,
Private
don't
party.
you know who I am?
Yeah.
I know the owner. I am important. Like, nah, the balance of power, whatever you think it is
Yeah.
not that right here. Right here, it's me saying whether you get in or not. And you flexing on me because your power dynamic in life is higher than the guy who's has a clipboard or picks people out to go inside and beer. It's different. Like, you're not in that terrain. And now you're trying to drag in the rest of your life just to get past that little velvet rope.
And yeah, you bring up a great thing, because I was going to say, like, this relates to people being like, I'm an artist or I'm a poet. And I think that's kind of all legit. But when someone's like, back in the Williamsburg days, like, I'm a DJ, and I'm like, what does that mean? Do people pay you to make people dance? Or, awesome, do you play your iPod in an empty bar and get paid $100 or drinks? Like, that's great too. And yes, you are a DJ, but like, I need more information. So when someone's like creative director, I'm like, what kind of creative director? I don't know.
So I understand what Joe Bernstein here it means by creative director. We know what he's implying by
He's taking
creative
shots.
director energy.
Yeah.
And he says 2015. Like what we just Cookie explained is shit that's the creative director as a insulting euphemism for like industry barnacle has certainly been around for 6 years, no doubt.
Yeah. At the very least, 6 years.
Right. I'm saying he mentioned 2015. Yeah, sure. We get that reference point. I still want to know how Williamsburg is insane and how it's pure decadence. Like, are we talking about people drinking and eating on the street? Are we talking about raging parties where everybody's doing ketamine? Like, what? I just want to know what the decadent element is and how do I get there?
I was waiting for a follow-up like tweet storm, be like, what happened to you? Where were you? Were you at the levee? Like, were you, like, what went wrong with your night, man?
So I was at Cafe Mogador.
Yeah.
What
The second
and then
Mogador in Williams, the satellite Mogador.
Exactly. Okay, so I went by the J. Crew store.
Right.
Like, what's the decadence? Are we talking about everyone driving around in Lambos and Raris? Are we talking about thousands of people, doing Molly on Berry Street? What exactly is the decadence specifically?
Was he at Whole Foods on Bedford? You
People
know?
are in there just buying fish. And it's crazy. It's just salmon after salmon after salmon.
Mortadell as far as the eye can see. Everyone has a football pack of mortadell under their arm, like Barry Sanders, no sin bin.
There's cuatro gabagules, cinco gabagules, seis gabagules.
Cinco gabagoles? Yeah, I mean, yo, we get what he's saying, but I was just waiting for a punchline, and it was delicious. I mean, the Cookies interns definitely jumped on it when I saw them in their cages. There was a smile on their face, and it was an interesting tweet, and we love that bait. But, like, are we still demonizing Williamsburg? Is that punching low?
That's what I couldn't tell. Was there a greater point, or was it just low-hanging, the pinata of Williamsburg being mentioned anywhere and saying that it, like, sucks or it's weird? I think the future of Williamsburg is kind of unclear because a few things. You have all these condos, and they lend themselves to a certain kind of clientele.
So many.
And they're still popping up
Yeah.
along the water. Just more and more from like Two Trees Realty, et cetera. I mean, they're just enormous. They look like Dubai. Mm-hmm. It's also one train stop away from Manhattan. So there's
Downtown Manhattan.
Yeah, and it's very fast over the bridge. So to me, I think Williamsburg just kind of leaves. I don't know. It's hard to say. It could maintain being kind of this college entry point where people go and live in a high rise and go into the city in their early 20s and into their 30s, and that's just what it is. Or it could be it gets really, really crazy expensive, and it's like a yuppie spot, and then people are opening up luxury stores and things, and then it just becomes kind of Soho-ish.
I was going to say, Soho sucks, man. And it's not because of necessarily, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, it's not necessarily because of like the disappearance of certain kinds of businesses like bodegas and diners. It's like not enough people took care of that place where it just became kind of a mall. And I like malls, whatever, but it's like an outdoor mall basically. Everyone has their flagship there. They're all tightly packed. They're all within like 3 or 4 blocks of each other. And back in the day, Soho, to my taste, was more interesting with galleries and bars and restaurants, right? Like the Trinity, the things I like.
The Tres Gabagoules, yes.
Yes, those gabagoules. You know what I mean?
But we're talking about an identical trajectory, really.
But maybe because there was no new developments in Soho. Soho just kind of renovated, right?
The thing about Williamsburg is also that it's such a recent organism in a lot of these ways, where it went from being, and I'm using the New York Times favorite word, like scruffy. It was a scruffy bohemian neighborhood with corduroys and Verb Cafe. And then it became popular and it became like a cool neighborhood. And up until like 2010, rolling into that area, it was legitimately very cool. Arguably the coolest place on the planet leading into that for a while.
Definitely.
Really cool. That in the East Village, but Lower East Side. But Williamsburg was unabashedly cool. There was fun stuff going on. There was always live music. There were always parties. Everyone was young. People hung out at McCarran Park, and it was like a bunch of a field of pasty stick and poke tattoos. It was like
I liked it. It was awesome.
It ruled. It was a college campus. That's it. It was the quad.
We were young. Yeah. Fuck it. Season 1 of Girls was a good show.
And then it kind of like blew up and became like a nightlife place where people would go to party. Then it became more expensive, and all of a sudden it was a ghost town at night, a total ghost town. Like North
Soho.
6th Street, which used to have all those music venues and party places, was just emptied. To your point, exactly like Soho. So I don't know what this current incarnation is. That's why I think that tweet was interesting to me, because I want to know if he's identifying a new permutation of this neighborhood, or if he's just throwing out words that people like gnash their teeth at.
Yeah, I was waiting for kind of like a take, right? And a take that I would have would be all those things that you said are indeed happening to Williamsburg. But to me, of course, I would say North 6 is turning into what it is because like of technology, right? Like music venues aren't really a thing. People aren't drinking beer until 5 a.m. as much as they used to. It's not as profitable to run a business that serves those people anymore.
Well,
You know?
I also don't even get how anything can be that decadent when you haven't been able to have people legally inside venues until midnight. Like, how decadent are we getting?
Yeah, is it just like, are we talking just living with money, or like
I don't know.
what kind of decadence, right? Or are people going for like the Mortadell plate, the Bucatine plate, the Gabagool plate all at the same time? Like that's some fucking decadence, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and maybe that's what it is. It's like, you stare into the decadence and the decadence stares back at you.
Or is it
it's
people
like you just reading into this tweet and seeing the crystallized decadence that you want to see in the Williamsburg of your mind?
He was wearing 4 Telfar bags at the same time, all in different colors, maybe different sizes.
By the way, I have a Mortadella correction to make. When we were talking about Tres Gabagoules last episode, which was an instant classic and perfect in every way, unprecedented until this week, I talked about the 3 kings of the Godfather hero, the Italian sub, and I put ham in there, and I want to retract that.
But yeah.
I'm retracting it. There is one ham to rule them all. Yes, that's true. There's only one ham, but it doesn't go in that sandwich. To me, it's salami, mortadella, and capicola.
Capicola, the day one gabagool, is sometimes in there, but also is there an authentic
I don't think prosciutto
Trinity?
really goes in that sandwich.
Man, back in the day in Little Italy, there used to be a shop, and they used to make the best fucking sandwiches, and I miss those sandwiches so much. And their classic, like Little Italy sandwich, featured prosciutto.
See, I think you could make a prosciutto sandwich, but I don't know that it goes in the Italian, like the big lump of meat, because good prosciutto is really expensive.
It's very expensive.
And to wedge it amongst inferior gabagoules.
So you're saying it's Genoa salam.
I think it's salam, copa,
Mortadell.
and mortadell.
Copa's kind of a deep cut, man. That's like a b-ball Paul, the b-ball Paul of.
Or is it sopressata? Or sopressat, as we call it.
It's very similar to salam. So I don't know.
Are these are there quattro?
No way. You've gone too far. You've gone too far.
Gabagoules.
It's Trace.
It's got to be Trace.
Yeah.
One
At
of these
that
is a
point,
fraud.
it's not a gabagool.
One of them is a lesser gabagool.
Yeah.
No disrespect.
I want to talk about sandwiches for a second, especially with the Mayor of Easttown finale and Wawa and all this sandwich discourse on Twitter. The Italian sub is like not the easiest thing to find in downtown New York. There is a spot in the Lower East Side across from Scars in Dime Square. That's amazing that its name is eluding me right now, but they make a kind of good one.
Are you talking about Regina's?
Regina's, I am. Thank you for that. Is the semolina sesame hoagie sub Italian sandwich kind of antiquated, or
Semolina?
semolina? Sorry, it took a long time for me to get out that word because of all the extra vowels. But what I really meant was semolina with sesame seeds. And
Floundering over there.
I am struggling today.
Not today. Today you're great. Just right now.
So, are they in low demand, or is no one making good ones?
There was a spot in Williamsburg, East Williamsburg, however you wanted to describe Graham Avenue.
Decadent.
There was
That's how I'll describe it.
It's crystallized decadence.
Yeah.
But they had a spot over there, and I think it closed probably like 8 years ago. Because it turned out that mobsters were using it as like for like a
Gambling
bookie.
shit.
They were
Yeah.
they were just doing like all their
They
like
were laundering
mob
money, right?
all their mob related bookkeeping was going on there,
Listen,
and they shut
I've seen
the
The
spot down.
Sopranos. I know how it works. Get any sandwich you want.
Unfortunately, Unfortunately, they had incredible Italian heroes, and exactly
Shout out
the
to
kind
Rich
you're
Zerbo.
talking about.
Yeah.
They were delightful, and that place shut down. I don't know the best replacement around me.
There's never a legal sandwich spot, man. All sandwich spots are fronts for gambling and racketeering. Prove me wrong.
I can't. It's a crime sandwich.
Yeah. No one actually just serves sandwiches. They break knees in the back.
Oh, like a racketeer with your mortadelle?
Okay, tell me what's in the racketeer. Other than like a nail file.
Also, the penchant for sandwich places, especially ones that are like newer, not mobbed up, naming their sandwiches cute things that are vaguely localized will always irritate me. I'm like, okay, I'm looking at your menu. Okay, yeah, so let me get the Graham Stop.
Oh,
that's
this is
that's
a
with
tradition,
honey
though.
turkey. I know it is.
Court
I know
Street
it is.
Grocers, like I love Court Street, and they
Very
do
good.
that. Their sandwiches are pretty good, right? But they certainly do that. They name them after celebrities. They name them after employees. I think it's cute.
Everyone does this.
Yeah,
Totally reasonable. But there's something about the new spots that are like, I don't know, it's like, oh yeah, an Australian brekkie place that serves their avo and their sandwiches. Like, yeah, let me get the grimy Bedford Avenue embezzler.
Well, now we're just criticizing writing, right? Like if it's poorly named, then we're bummed on it. If it's like,
But it's just a ham and cheese. It's just a ham and cheese, man.
yeah, but which ham? Oh,
There's only one, dude.
oh, right, because Cappy ham is the same as Hormel honey ham.
Like, you can believe what Big Ham tells you, but I know there's only one Big Ham.
But prosciutto is ham. It's just uncooked, right? As soon as you cook it, they change the name to something else. I forget.
Look, cured, different ballgame.
Curry meats is wild, man. It never occurs to me, like when I'm devouring that Genoa, delicious Genoa sub, that meat is cured and not cooked.
I got to be honest with you. I had a mortadelle sandwich
What
earlier today.
huge news! Huge news! Was it from Frenchette?
No, it was a local spot in Greenpoint, and it was on some focaccia.
That's short for focaccia, right? Gotcha.
It had a little arug on top of it,
Spicy.
and some
Like your
mortadelle,
takes.
and some mustard.
That sounds nice, man. A mustard. Ooh, you lost me at mustard, man. Where's the mayonnaise?
There may have been some olive oil in there. I don't know. It was already made. I didn't have it created to my own
Was it too big?
specifications.
I bet you it was too big. But
was
towards the end, you were like, "Is this too much food?"
It was substantial. The problem was, right as I started eating it, I realized that a week ago I had the same sandwich after our last mortadelle conversation, and I bit my lip really hard,
Ooh, that sucks.
and it still kind of hurts. And
Yeah, that
as I
sucks.
bit into this one, it was an immediate throwback to the pain and jeopardy and peril that I was currently in, and I started regretting it as I was eating it, and had to chew really slowly, and I felt like a fool.
Like an MSG playoff game. Yeah, I mean, a playoff game at MSG. Yeah, maybe you have mortadelle on the mind.
I definitely do.
That mortadelle brain, as they say. As soon as you mention mortadelle, you have to put it into existence.
It was nice focaccia though, rosemary with like flaky salt on top.
Some
Like a-
people try to push that as pizza, but not to be mistaken, it's focaccia bread. They say it's like, oh, it's deep dish pizza.
It was clearly focaccia.
It's too holy for me, man. Like if you put sauce, like a red sauce on it or mayonnaise, it goes through the holes too easily.
You want a little more secular bread.
I do love a brioche, but that's a whole different world.
All right. Let's get down to what people want to hear this week. More about brioche. Wait. The finale.
Wow, are we brave enough to go there?
I'm ready if you are.
Do
my
we have
man.
the courage to talk about the finale of The Mayor of Easttown?
the finale?
The finale. Oh yeah, sorry. It was a very long-winded sentence. I apologize.
I thought it was well told.
So we were kind of wrong, but a little bit right. We were on to something.
Well, we
No
made
one
some
cares.
predictions last week about the sleeper suspects in HBO's hit series Mayor of Pound Town.
Is the daughter sus?
We
Suspect
thought
in
the daughter
murder.
was a suspect. We also identified the busy friend as potentially involved in a homicide. And she kind of was.
Well, yeah, it was clear that family, it was in that family, right? So where we were the closest was when we were like, her husband was like, don't tell Mare. And then she immediately tells Mare something. It's like, oh, she's lying. What is she trying to cover up? I didn't really pinpoint the kid because it was annoying. It was kind of Game of Thrones-ish, where they kind of hid him from sight after a while.
That's what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
Because I think it was Willie Staley commented on Twitter that it was Maggie shoots Mr. Burns.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Right.
And to the idea that you were just discussing, where you create a whole bunch of suspects and various motivations, and then you say, haha, it was none of them. It was someone that we gave you no inkling was even involved. And you couldn't have guessed unless you were just guessing that we were going to do that.
Yeah. Starly Kine on Twitter was like, I'm going to watch all of this all at once before the finale. She was like, what's up with the little kid? I'm like, oh, that's the benefit from watching it all in the same sitting, because she remembered it. And she was like, I got it right. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
I get it. And I don't remember that the little kid even existed.
Well, he beat up that kid with the tray in the lunchroom, sort of like a Knicks fan eating alone at the food court. And then he was crying, and then his mom was just like, it's going to be okay. And she was very worried, and there was a shot of her contemplating their future.
I had literally forgotten that happened.
Totally, because they buried it under other murder shit, like guns and fishing and real tree camo.
So what I was told by secondhand, but for someone who was on that show and appeared in 2 episodes, they told one of my friends that they were supposed to be in 4, and that the series was shortened significantly. I don't know if that means 1 episode or 3 episodes or 5 episodes because of COVID. So that would explain why certain shifts felt abrupt. And I think that action-packed episode 5, maybe that would have taken place over like 2 or 3 or 4 episodes.
That's disappointing to hear, because as prestige murder stories go on HBO, this has to be one of the best ones. Even though the ending got a solid elimination in the first round, it was still a really fun road up until the ending. I would have wanted to see more. I thought like the last episode was kind of like, it just kind of tried to trick us with, we solved it, everything's mellow. I'm like, you're only 15 minutes into it, man. Something else happens. And it was kind of like telegraphed in a pacing way. And the actual reveal was like, cool. And then I had to take an overarching view of the story and kind of find other parts of it, being like, just in terms of like what happened procedurally on the show, it was like, I don't know what executive producer got their hands on it, but like,
Yeah, I thought one approach to the series is saying, well, you tuned in for a mystery, a police procedural small town mystery. And instead, it was about women dealing with trauma. And the murder mystery was the hook. But it was really about friendship and coming to terms with loss, and these sort of parallel stories of 2 women losing their son in different manners and having their family crumble. And that's what this story is about. I'm like, that could be true, but that's also just good acting. And that's just what makes a story work. So was it a successful mystery story? I think it was okay.
yeah.
I mostly think it was just Kate Winslet being 2018 LeBron James.
Oh, she's incredible. But
Story, whatever, plots, whatever. It doesn't matter. It was Kate Winslet on TV for 7 hours, out there with like J.R. Smith and Channing Frye and like washed Derrick Rose, doing his thing and just taking this show to the finals.
I'll take the different approach to that. The feeling I had during the end, and your approach is very legit, I think, because Kate Winslet is the LeBron James of acting. But I think it reminded me of Fargo, and Fargo, I think, is one of the great movies ever. And I think we get caught up in the accents and the styling and the great acting in Fargo, but really it was like a perfectly written story about like duty and the afterlife and being stuck between heaven and hell. And there's a pregnant police officer surrounded by like these biblical sins, right? And she wanders through Earth trying to do good things for redemption. And I thought the Coen brothers are geniuses, so they did it in a way that is like so subtle and kind of haunting, but like and funny. And I felt that way about Mare. She was not I didn't read her as redeemed at the end. She walks up into hell again, if you want to do heaven and hell, like up the ladder to where her son committed suicide. But she spent the whole show taking children away from other women. And it was like kind of this struggle she had with like searching for redemption, but then doing bad things.
I am with you, because she never seemed to really regret planting drugs on
It's a foul move, dude.
a foul move. She never seemed to regret that she planted drugs on a recovering addict's car, pulled her over, and in an attempt to make her lose custody of her own like grandson.
Right.
Like that's fucking crazy,
Yeah.
and it's so foul. And they let her, she was removed from the force and then was brought back. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, she was running around while not being a detective. Yeah. And other cops are dying. She's tackling old men. I mean, she was an utterly worthless cop in most ways, and a worthless person. So I think it was intriguing as an anti-hero, but I do think it was very cowardly that they did not show that scene. And I don't know if it was in there at one point and they took it out because of last summer's protests, where they said people are going to really hate this character if we show her planting drugs on like a struggling teenager in order to get custody of her child. Like you can't come back from that.
Yeah.
So they didn't show it on camera. It was all discussed, implied, it happened, but we didn't see it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cowardly.
Yeah.
If you want us to like this awful cop, this lousy person, and we're supposed to like them because the show is focused on them, and that they're going to have this arc, as you said, of accepting their trauma, but without really becoming a better person. Mm-hmm. She just kind of came to grips with her son in some ways. Mm-hmm. The loss of her son.
Yeah, on her own terms. And like, why was there a priest character? Now, we never really find out that much about him, but
well, they were just all red herrings, right?
Or storytelling wise, it does make sense because, in my opinion, she was pitting the ideas of duty on a worldly, like, American law premise versus the duties of a friend, a mother, daughter kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So what duties do you have on Earth, and what duties do you have inherently built into yourself as an animal, And I think having a priest there was like, if you want to complicate any story, just throw religion in there. And the Coen brothers did that perfectly all the time. We're like, what is Barton Fink? How come you just threw in a World War II thing? And they're like, I don't know. We thought it could be like kind of confusing and cool, and we think about it all the time, but it doesn't necessarily have a device in the story, It's not an actual device in the story. But it made me think of the finale of Seinfeld, because I think HBO was kind of always aware of the flop that was Game of Thrones. that every character kind of their story got tied up into like a nice little ribbon, right? It's like, oh, the writer's off to do like a teaching year, and they're good, and they maybe they'll pick up the romance, maybe not, but Mare's into him now. I'm like, we don't need all this.
Also,
Like,
just a weird scene too, where
Yeah,
she's
that
in
was-
bed, he's gone. She looks out the window, and he's down there like loading up the back of his drop.
yeah, his wagon, but like, yeah, felt like the Seinfeld finale, which I think is a criminally underrated thing because it predicted all the, in my opinion, it predicted all the grossness that became social media. But you know, it's every character being like, "You're a bad man, Jerry." He's like, "I don't think so," and then they end up in jail. You know, like arguing over the same things.
Well, the scene in the church was kind of had that energy. Well, like, oh, the entire community has showed out, and the once befouled preacher is back on the pulpit, and you look around and everyone in town is there reacting in just what you said, in like, here's their
Yeah.
climactic scene. You will
Yes.
never see them again. Here they are.
Yep, here's every player in the story, and you know, like, it's a cool way to do it, but it wasn't. I was very satisfied. I thought it was a really great show, but it felt a little like there was many hands in that script, and many people had their kind of say. It's like, we have to show the writer again. I'm like, no, you don't. You know, like, you don't have to show him again. Like, we get what you're trying to do.
Well, there were some scenes that it felt as if, again, Kate Winslet is LeBron James, and like, all right, J.R. Smith is playing with you. He's going to get some shots up. Might not be the greatest shots. Might be bad shot selection, but ultimately you're going to be okay because you got Bronny.
Yeah.
And I think that there were a few scenes, like when her dead partner's mom slaps her. And I'm like, I don't buy that. They found two missing girls, solved a year-long investigation. There was a shootout, and they killed, a malevolent predator that was in the town's midst. I'm like, you're mad at her?
Mare was always extracting daughters from places or kids from places, right? Like, she kills this young man who lives with his mom. She extracts these two prisoners, a different kind of family relationship going on there. Hilarious that I don't even want to go there, but like, and then, of course, she takes her best friend's family away from her. And I was like, yo, Mare is doing this according to the laws of Easttown, but this is kind of like a Grim Reaper, right? Like, she comes through and just like takes families away.
Well, there was a debate about that, and a couple different articles discussed. And one article was like, she's a lousy cop who kind of is effective because she knows everyone in town, and they all kind of respect her.
Leon
and the other one
Rose,
was
yeah.
that, that's one take. And the other one was that, like, no one likes her or respects her. They all fear her for the reasons you just said.
Yeah.
And I think both of those are totally reasonable interpretations, and not even at odds with each other in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, the last shot was cool because she could have been ascending anywhere. Like, you could have had the camera just go up and get the effect that she is, like, redeemed, right? But instead, they have a shot of her going up into the attic where her problems started. So it's kind of circular, right?
What about in that scene as she goes up, they show like the rafter, and then it cuts back to her face. Then she like looks to the side and there's a rope, and then she looks back up at the rafter, and then she looks down at the rope, and then she like just smiles at the camera.
And then looks back at the rafter, and there's a Knicks banner that says "Made the Playoffs 2021."
So we're all under the same conclusion, right? That Mare hangs herself at the end.
Oh, I did not see that.
She goes up to the attic to hang herself.
No, she goes up to the attic to hang out. It's a big difference between hanging herself and hanging out. She's cool with it, man. She's chill now. She has a Gen X trank because she's taken everybody's children away from them in town. There's no more kids.
It ends up with her throwing a looped noose over the rafter and then like winking at the camera.
Through the noose.
Just a little glint.
Yeah. Not to poke fun at mental illness, but like it's a, like I wanted more from. I wanted a little more, but I got enough. I shouldn't be greedy. That was a great show.
Stop being greedy, as DMX said.
But they were trying to trick us the whole time. I got so much. I mean, it was fun because it was kind of an event in my text friend circle, and at least 2 people were like, "Oh, we find out who the killer is in the first 15 minutes. What a dud of a finale!" I'm like, "In what world do you think that's it? Come on!"
I laughed.
Listen to the music. Listen to the music.
Yeah, I laughed when it was 15 minutes in and they've come to a satisfying conclusion. Like, yeah, right.
Whatever.
Well, one thing is, this is maybe a meta part of writing for TV now, whether it's streamable or it's something that's bingeable or it's serialized on a weekly basis. You now see a lot of gamesmanship between the writing in a show and the intended audience, because they know that when Guy Pearce shows up, people are going to say, "That's Guy Pearce. Why is he in this role?
Yeah.
He is a big actor." It turned out that someone else dropped out and they just grabbed him for the role. But we look at it and we say, Guy Pearce.
We have to, right? It's like looking at a thing and then reading the Wikipedia entry of that thing. First, you got to look at it, and then you got to be curious. But yeah,
and even what you, sorry to cut you off, and even what you mentioned before, the woman who watched it in rapid succession, picking up on those clues that were spaced out over a month and a half for everyone else.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think they did a great job. But yeah, I think the casting of Guy Pearce was kind of ham-fisted. There's multiple hams, and in this case, it was fisted.
The fisting of hams. But they did say someone dropped out and he just stepped into the role. So it was not necessarily an intent to cast a big name in a bit spot. It just sort of happened.
Was it Billy Zane? Was it Leonardo DiCaprio? Were they trying to get the band back together?
Whoopi Goldberg?
Yeah, I mean, it could have gotten very wacky. I think they did a good job of holding it down. They could have gotten very Sixers and Philly on everyone, and the BMM would definitely not talk about that at that point. The BMM still won't talk about it, but it was a Pennsylvania classic.
Speaking of Pennsylvania classics,
Huh?
what a day yesterday. What a day in the world of round ball. I mean, just from a Cookie's perspective. Like, not only did you have a Ben Simmons triple dub in a closeout game against the Wizards,
With a lot of points, which
played well.
held off the
We can
Twitterverse
get into
for a
that.
second.
But you also had the BMM brought to its knees with upheaval in Boston, and then just as a bonus, Coach K announcing his retirement. Bad day to be an enemy of the pod.
It's a Trace Gabagools.
Are those the Trace Gabagools?
Yes, they are. It was revealed finally. The finale of the Trace Gabagools. Coach K is the third ham. Yeah, man, a lot went on in the NBA and basketball universe. Where do we even begin?
Let's start in the Beantown.
Long week for the BMM to like. What do you have to say for yourself? It's like, well, we have to say no one disrespects Lucky the Leprechaun on our watch. I'm like, yeah, what about that other stuff? It's like, you don't disrespect logos. I'm like, but what about the other stuff? Not that anyone wants to talk about what Kyrie mentioned a week ago when he was like, I hope no racist stuff happens in Boston, and everyone was half. If you're from Boston, being like, you got to come here, it's not that bad, and other people are like, well, that's why we moved away from Boston. I don't know.
The week for the Celtics was quite funny if you were not a Celtics fan.
Right, exactly.
Because
And predictable
of course,
if you were.
right. So you had Kyrie returning to Boston after making a few comments that, again, were innocuous. They were also shaded for sure.
Yep,
But he's like, I hope we don't have, racism and bellicosity, or however he phrased it. And people were like, well, here's what I think about Boston and race and sports. And, you got people from Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown, everyone chipping in and giving their sort of analysis on Kyrie. And then the Celtics played the Nets and got their one win in game 3 of the series.
Like gentlemen, gave them one win.
And Tatum had a huge game. And it was very...
That was a fun game.
No, this was very Jason Tatum in a nutshell. I don't think he shot over 40% for the series. It's fairly efficient. He had a blowout game, and he had 50 points and played magnificently. But the 2 prior games, he kind of couldn't hit the side of the barn.
Right.
This has been the Tatum season, that he has these sterling, brilliant performances that we anoint him as a superstar, and we just kind of let the other ones that are hyper middling just sort of, blow in the breeze.
Dame Lillard. Yeah.
But so you had Kyrie come back, I think he scored 36, stomped on Lucky the Leprechaun's nose, got Boston furious, then had a bottle thrown at him, and then they close out the Celtics in the following game back at Barclays Center.
Crushed them.
That series was never in doubt. It only felt as if the Celtics won a game because Brooklyn kind of got bored.
Yeah, and all these teams are good, and, you can lose a game for sure.
Celtics are not good, though.
I mean, they're good enough. If one guy gets hot, then, what can you do, right?
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that series, we'll talk more about the Nets in a bit. That series doesn't tell me anything about either of those teams.
No, it's a classic first round series, right? Of a 1-8.
Or
2.
Tatum's a good player, but they're missing Jaylen Brown. Kemba's off and on. Robert Williams got hurt. That version of that Celtics team was never going to win multiple games and make that a series unless Brooklyn just stopped caring entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, it swung in Brooklyn's way in that their 3 guys, 4 if you include Joe Harris, the big 4, those guys were healthy. And, Celtics fans rightfully were like, yo, if it was Jaylen Brown, it'd be a different series. But if Miles Turner was healthy, if Thomas Bryant was healthy, the Celtics don't make the playoffs. They don't really get through the play-in. So it depends on where you want to start this karma stuff. But if you go back a little further, the entire East, the Indiana Pacers, they lost a lot of players. And the Celtics got in. And I think Boston fans, I don't know, should be happy that they had a playoff series. How I feel about the Knicks. We got in. We weren't supposed to be in there. The East is really bad.
Well, I think there are some parallels to sort of what happened in Philadelphia last year, where Simmons missed the playoffs and they lost the Celtics in convincing fashion. And people said, okay, things are completely awry. Changes need to be made. And likewise in Boston, following a loss to the Nets that was completely expected, as you said, their roster was missing key components. They weren't as good as Brooklyn to begin with.
Yeah.
Nothing happened that should not have happened in that series.
Sure.
But Boston's response was Danny Ainge is stepping down into ostensibly retirement, and Brad Stevens, the Celtics coach, is now moving into a front office general manager position, and then they will be filling that coaching vacancy this offseason.
With the singer from the Dropkick Murphys. Yeah, right.
With DJ Lethal of House of Pain.
Yeah.
I don't know what this actually means for the Celtics, because Mike Zarin is a really bright guy. I think he has been instrumental in the transactions that have turned the Celtics into a successful organization. Mm-hmm. And it looks as if he's remaining in the same role, where he's apparently the one who negotiates trades for the most part, or he's the one who gets on the phone at least.
Yeah.
He's one of the sort of fathers of analytics movement. So it doesn't seem like their front office is specifically going to change, except that we don't have any inclination that Brad Stevens is good at that stuff.
Yeah, it's a Phil Jackson situation, right, where he's trying this for the first time. And he is, of course, prepared. He's a basketball genius. He's coached in the National Basketball Association, NBA. But, I think if you're a Celtics fan, you're kind of relieved, right? Because the writing was on the wall on this trade deadline when it was open secret that no one really wanted to deal with Danny Ainge. It was just a wrap for him. And I mistakenly killed Danny Ainge on this podcast a few years ago, and I still feel bad for it because he did not die when he had that heart attack. But I wanted him to retire because that's no joke. And he, however much like we poke fun at the Celtics, like it's a stressful job, man. He's an old guy. No one really likes him. Like if I was a Celtics fan, I'd be optimistic today.
Any anonymous quote from a GM about the modern players or player autonomy and movement ruining the NBA, like Ainge, gotta be Ainge.
Yeah, right.
Could be anybody,
one
but
liked
we're just
him,
attributing it to Ainge, like the saltiest,
Yeah.
like least progressive approaches to viewing the current state of the NBA are just Ainge.
He's the mayor of Northeast Town. Like, he knows everybody, obviously full life in the NBA, but no one really likes him. And everything gets worse when he steps in the door. It looks like it's getting better, but they're actually worse off with him.
You know, if we exclude the big three, which
The big four.
there was some
Rondo.
big four, yeah, but there was some foul stuff about how that came to fruition. You know, Kevin McHale just gifting the Celtics Kevin Garnett, like that was horseshit.
It's connections. I can live with it. You know, it's friendship. That's why you hire certain people to be your GM.
Oh, right. No question about that. I mostly mean in terms of how they assembled that team.
It was shamrocks and shenanigans for sure.
Yeah. Yes. And then you look at his rebuild after that. You know, just setting aside the big three, the big four, that era. He did an incredible job
Talking about IT and stuff.
like he did a good job making cutthroat deals, not re-signing their players, sending their players off who would, you know, were highly loved by the fan base. Like he made hard decisions and amassed a trove of draft assets that turned out to be really valuable. But I think ultimately you have to say that he didn't pull the trigger enough times. And you look at that Celtics team now, I'm like, I don't really know where that goes.
It looks like purgatory. But after you kind of said all that, I kind of retract my previous statement. He did a fine job. The results just weren't like the picks didn't fall on a Luka Doncic or a transformative player. Like he got Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which are grand slam home runs, right? But they're not the tier of superstar you would hope after acquiring all those picks.
I totally agree. I think he had a lot of assets and was reluctant to trade for superstars, whether or not that were smart moves or not. The Anthony Davises and the Paul Georges and the Jimmy Butlers, they were always reportedly in the mix. Ainge was always in there wheeling and dealing and didn't want to give up his picks, didn't want to give up his young guys. The only time they added a superstar was via Kyrie. I mean, Hayward, Horford, very good players. Kyrie, that was a great trade. They got Kyrie on, for pennies on the dollar. And I do think him leaving was kind of the nail in the Ainge
He never
the
quite
Ainge administration's coffin.
Well, and Kyrie went on the offensive, so it was a double whammy, right? He lost a transformative player, and that player kind of made things difficult for him because he was really unhappy with his experience, and we all knew that kind of in plain sight.
But it was also the fault of Boston. Not to say that it was their fault he left, but they put out their media army and they blamed Kyrie.
It was
like
gross,
the BMM went out and was like, Kyrie's mentally ill. He's
Yeah.
team cancer. He's all this stuff. So Kyrie's like, well, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
You traded for me. Yeah, I said I was going to resign there, but like you traded for me. I'm not a Celtic for lifer. I never signed with you.
Yeah. I mean, when Kyrie said that stuff about fans, I kind of think he was like gaslighting, obviously, the media, right? And the way local writers painted him as like a cancerous player. He's got ideas, but, it's hard to call him cancerous when he's won a championship and he's likely to win another. Like, and I get why the BMM does that. You know, it's just like we always say, it's a tune that is very memorable that you hum and it's effortless kind of. But if Kyrie's on this team with Tatum, Time Lord, and Jaylen Brown, they probably make it to the conference finals kind of every year, right?
I think so. I mean,
Kyrie's really good.
Kyrie is so much better than Kemba Walker. It's not even comparable.
Shout out to Kemba Walker. Yeah.
I like Kemba. And a few years ago, I was like, I don't think that's that big of a drop off. But Kyrie has kept improving, and Kemba's knee has acted up. Like, Kemba is not the same player he was a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's just from a basketball fan mindset, it's a bummer to see Kemba Walker depreciate like this. He's a great player, and I wanted a good Celtics team, right? Like, I want teams to play a good Boston squad. But Kemba has 2 years left of that huge contract, and they're in purgatory unless they can find a sucker, the New York Knicks, to like take some of these pieces.
Yeah, Kemba just does not look like the same guy.
No, he does not. It sucks.
I agree. But yeah, I don't know what this front office upheaval really means for the Celtics. I would not be, if I was a Celtics fan, I'm not sure I would care that much.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, has Ainge done a great job over the last few years? Not really. Has Brad Stevens been a great coach over the last few years? He might be a good X's and O's guy, but players seem not to love him at this point, or to not. Maybe they've tuned him out. And I look at that argument for Brett Brown. Like, I don't think Brett Brown should have been fired for the team's performance. I thought he did a good job, but maybe you want someone else in there that the players respond to. Maybe that's possible. This is all like kind of boomery, but I'm not willing to completely rule it out that if managing relationships and characters and personalities within a locker room is a big part of the job, being something of a babysitter, or like the headmaster of a school, like you're the teacher, you got to get people paying attention. If Brett Brown has people throwing paper airplanes at his back and putting thumbtacks on his chair, even if he's teaching this stuff properly, maybe you got to bring in someone else. I'm willing to at least concede it's possible.
Yo, when you're House of Pain and you have a smash hit called Jump Around and you do your thing, eventually, like, it's hard to sustain that. They put out another album. People were not as excited. So Everlast had to rebrand as like a country singer, right? And then he got more attention. Every kind of thing must do, like, you can't be the same partner in your home the whole time. Like, you have to change. And I agree. This is going to happen to Tibbs in New York City. It may be happening already, where people are like, we're done loving him. And I'm like, oh yeah, time sucks. But like, I think the writing was on the wall, I think, as I said, like during this trade deadline. And Celtics fans should be psyched. I think there's a new old thing that they have now. So,
well, as they always say, when one rebuilding door closes, another rebuilding door opens.
The procedure 2, more procedures.
Sometimes I feel like you don't trust the procedure, Andrew.
Trust? Yeah, I trust the finale. They call Tatum the finale. The streets are calling Jaylen Brown and Tatum
the finale.
The finale. Sorry, there's too many syllables, man.
Man, the rebuild continues. The Celtics, my friends.
I love to claim purgatory, and they're in purgatory, baby.
Oh, I mean, I love a good rebuild, and you love a good purgatory, and here we are.
I mean, they're not trading Jaylen Brown or Tatum because they love him so much, and they're never going to do anything with those two good redundant players.
I agree. Speaking of good redundant players, I guess Randall's not redundant. Randall just disappeared.
Randall had a tough week, man. It's hard to tell. Like, at some point, I was like, does he have the bubble guts? Does he, was he disappointed at the proceedings of Mayor of Easttown? Like, what was going on in his mind outside of basketball?
So after a wonderful season in which Randall was mentioned comically as a MVP candidate, but nonetheless, which speaks to
All NBA, baby.
how well he played, put up enormous numbers, played a shit ton of minutes, was honored as the NBA's most improved player this season.
With a backhand, right? That award is hilarious.
But Julius Randle then went into the playoffs and absolutely stunk it up. Like, he was really bad. Just rough numbers, like true shooting percentage, 42.5%. Just brutal. You know, if you care about things like BPM, it was negative 3.5. Just a huge drain.
And he was a positive 3.5 in the regular season.
Exactly. So, this is a guy who, as we said, played fabulously well. This was his first playoff experience in his entire career. In those 5 games, he shot under 30% from the floor and, averaged more turnovers than assists. It was a real diametric opposite to how well he acted as a distributor, a primary scorer, above average efficiency over the regular season, and was just a calamity, an absolute disgrace to the game.
I don't think so, obviously.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
No, he just
he wanted it too much. He got the yips, man. He was like, how do I take this boulder and turn it into dust because I want it so bad? And he was never comfortable. This is my annoying take. RJ Barrett sucked. Like, the Tibbs did not put Julius Randle in the position to succeed, because all Julius Randle was doing was like dribbling a couple times, turning his back and shooting jump shots. And I'm like, yeah, he's going to miss a ton of these, man, because the Hawks are good defensively and Capella was kind of really annoying to play against. And Tibbs just kind of tried to put a round peg in a square hole, which was what he does, and we love him for it, and we got here. But Randall had an objectively bad series, and he didn't get much help from anyone around him.
I mean, what it came down to was that the Knicks just couldn't score.
They ran out of talent. It's just like, awesome season. They are not as good as the Hawks. The Hawks had a better plan. The Hawks got players that were hot. Trae Young went off. And I hate to be that obvious Mayor of Easttown fan, but if you don't attack Trae on defense once in a while, like if the Hawks can hide him, advantage Hawks.
Yeah, the Knicks as a team had an offensive rating of 104.
Not good.
Against the Hawks in that series, and like
they're not a good offensive team either.
They were a lousy offensive team all year,
the slowest in the league in pace.
Yeah, so I was not surprised at all by them losing the series in a decisive manner. It was sad to see Randall really struggle as someone who that the New York had grown to love and really supported, was excited to see in the postseason for the first time. I think Nate McMillan did a great job game planning for Randall.
He's a good coach.
They had big athletic defenders on him. They closed off the lane.
They made him shoot long jump shots like all day.
And look, to his credit, over the regular season, he made most of those. He was a great jump shooter and a great bucket maker of lousy shots. But the Hawks contested them more. He was a bit off. And they did a great job stepping into the passing lane and kind of understanding his inclination to hold the ball for a split second too long before taking a shot or making a move.
All the players did. Yeah.
It felt like they were always close to getting a turnover, like swiping at the ball, jumping into passing lanes. Like they made his life miserable.
Yeah, and it was an awesome game plan. And, at some point I was wondering when Tibbs was wrong and when he was right. Like, I don't think there's fault in sticking to what got you here. Like, well, Randall's our best player. I trust him to figure this out. Like, at what point do you not trust the process? In an elimination game, you kind of got to try stuff, and I wanted IQ to go off. I wanted Derrick Rose got his shots. He had some good games, but like, this is the John Starks like memory, right? Him shooting a zillion times, being like, the next one's going in, and we have this championship, and the next one never went in.
It also feels like the Knicks never really found their footing in that series either.
Tibbs was blindsided by a
Well, that's what I
really
mean.
great coach.
You know, you get gentlemen swept. It never feels like, oh, if they had just made this adaptation, it was like, nah,
No.
they got mollywopped.
A 4-5 matchup is tough, man. And that 4-5 matchup was not a clear division. Like, I still think the Knicks could have won, but they certainly did not. You know, if you want to replay this series next week, I'm like, the Knicks have a good chance to win this. They just lost games, and that sounds simplistic, but you're right. It's like the Hawks were all healthy and firing, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Knicks offensive rating of, what did I say, 104.5, whatever, that would basically place you for this season between the Orlando Magic at 29 and the Oklahoma City Thunder at 30th.
But their defense wasn't that good this series, and that's a big deal, right?
I guess my point here was that if you can't score at a level that's better than like 29 teams, your defense has to be insanely good. And it's hard to be that good defensively in order to keep up with not being able to score points.
Yeah, they had runs. They had halves that looked great. But Nerlens Noel having a bum ankle was a huge deal. And, that's game. You know, when you saw that Nerlens wasn't right, like, he's so important to this team. So I just tried to enjoy the games. We got that Obi Toppin dunk. Like, we won a championship. Fight me.
And honestly, I thought their defense was pretty good.
It was okay.
No, I mean they held the Hawks to like an offensive rating of like 111, which is
It has to
quite
be
a bit
better.
below their average.
Yeah.
And would put them kind of in like the lower half of the league, just proportionately.
Yeah. They held
if you-
Bogdanovich down.
They did a good job,
Yeah.
but they just could not score points.
It was ugly.
Last game, it felt like 2003 basketball. You looked at the score and they had 77 points, you know, with 4 minutes left in the game or something.
And it may be me just like self-soothing, but they lost in a granular way. I kind of, after game 3, I was just like, well, what is the future of this team? Is there something real here or not? Because they seem like they're having too many problems versus the Hawks, and the Hawks are a good team. So is this Knicks team a perennial playoff team, or was this kind of like a run that they had? They rattled off a lot of wins in a month.
No, the Hawks are very good.
Hawks are good.
They are a formidable, tough opponent who can throw big bodies at you. They can play different ways. They have one of the league's dozen players who can kind of manhandle an offense all by themselves. When we discussed the Hawks a couple months ago, and we were kind of roasting them, and I just jumped on to cleaning the glass, and I was like, wait a minute. They're good when Trey is on the court. They're just losing when he sits. They're losing games when he's, injured or even in those
Capello,
12 minutes a game when he's sitting out. Yeah. When he's on the court, they're good. Yeah. And then they got healthy, and all of a sudden we're really good. So
Bogdanovich being healthy is everything for that team, in my opinion. And he was off for most of the season.
And as a Sixers fan, and Gallinari being back helps. As a Sixers fan,
awesome.
I look at that Hawks team and I say they have a lot of offensive weapons. They have some really good shooters. They have, one of the premier playmakers in the NBA, and a guy who is no longer welcome in Dime Square in Trae Young. And then they have big bodies in John Collins, who can spread the floor, and then Clint Capella, who's a traditional rim protector, rebounder, shot blocker, lob catcher. Like, they are a well-constructed team.
I mean, before we get into the round 2 matchups, I think, like, just to wrap up the Knicks season, good things. It could go sideways really fast if they don't re-sign Nerlens. I think you re-sign Julius Randle to that max contract, whatever he wants, because you're going to have 3 players who make money, and him being one of the 3 is okay if you want to do it.
Well, you don't have to do anything with Julius Randle yet.
Yeah, he's got a year left, but I think extending, he's going to get max, so you might as well wait a year to see if he gets hurt or whatever, because he played a lot of minutes. But Lonzo's not coming, so I was looking at the free agent list, and like your boy, the process king, TJ McConnell looks like a great fit. They might have to pay him, though.
Why is your take that Lonzo isn't coming?
Just because the Pelicans have the space to match any offer. And I think they do because he had a strong end and they can offer him an additional year. So, unless, like, I don't know the exact rules, but I think they can either match. If they match equally and give him an extra year, can he still leave? I think maybe.
No, he can't leave.
They just have
unless
to
the
match,
Pelicans
right?
let him walk. So I think a team like the Kings and I think a team like maybe the Knicks are going to offer a really onerous contract
Poison pill.
for Lonzo. So I mean, not quite a poison pill, but sort of in the way that it will be, all right, we're going to give him a 3-year deal with an opt-out after year 2 at a maximum amount with a trade kicker, all these things that would discourage the Pelicans from acquiring him. And if you get that guy, you have to deal with the ramifications of those things as well. And a lot of times we've seen teams such as like Miami Heat with Tyler Johnson and his bars, and Portland with what the hell is that shooter that the Nets gave
Simon?
that crazy offer to?
Oh,
Alan Crabb.
yeah.
And those teams both regretted not letting the player walk. So I think there's also a matter of pride where, the Knicks come in and say, we'll take Lonzo. We're going to give him this completely annoying contract for whoever has him. And the team says, fuck off. You're not stealing our player or bullying us. We'll take him. We're
But
keeping
then you're
him.
saddled with him. It's strategy. It's good strategy for the Knicks. It's a win-win, right? I mean, they don't get the player, but they can saddle New Orleans.
Yeah, I would be surprised if a team like the Knicks or the Kings does not make Lonzo a max offer with some of those like de-incentivizing aspects to it.
But I'd be more surprised if it worked and the Pelicans let him go. Like, there's not many. I was trying to look at all the playmakers in the league. I don't know, man. It's kind of a dwindling kind of skill. And, how the Pelicans view their years with Zion before they have to give him huge money, I don't know. But I think Lonzo in New York is kind of a long shot. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but New Orleans is in the driver's seat here, and he had a great
It's
season.
their call.
Yeah.
You can make their contract as awful as possible. They can still say it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And they might be like, oh, we hate this, but we're still going to do it.
I'm looking at their books right now. Steve Adams still has a lousy contract for 2 more years. Ingram makes max amount. Bledsoe gets paid quite a bit for 2 more years.
Yeah,
There is a chance that the Pelicans say, you know what? We don't want to keep Lonzo at this amount. We don't want to go over the salary cap just to keep this team intact because we're still going to be paying Zion and Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, these young guys. So they might say, we just don't want to throw another $27 million player on the books here. So it's possible they would let Lonzo walk, especially if he doesn't want to be there.
I mean, they have to offer him bird rights, right? I'm reading here, like, they can give an 8% pay raise over the Knicks 5%, and then only the New Orleans Pelicans can give him that 5th year. So, like, they can do better.
They can just match anything. They could offer anything. Like he can't leave according to the rules of restricted free agency unless the Pelicans let him. He can't force his way out. He could take the qualifying offer and just not resign and make his rookie scale contract for the 5th season and then bounce. But no one ever really does that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyway, we've digressed and gotten into Pelicans finances. But back to the Knicks, though, just before we wrap up on them. What do you want them to do? You mentioned T.J. McConnell. You are a tanking enthusiast. They didn't do that.
No.
They at least arguably put themselves in position, especially
I'm a
with
process enthusiast.
like the ravenous crowds in the Garden, for better or worse. But we saw the power of basketball in New York. Everyone around the league saw it. Like, hey, the Knicks were pretty good. They came up short.
Got the league paying attention. Sixers fans are like, "Oh, your team sucks." I'm like, Oh yeah, we're back. Are we back in the NBA? This is incredible. And yeah, they
So,
made the
so
playoffs.
that was their strategy. Whether or not it will be a good one for the long term,
Yeah.
they went all in on trying to win as many games as possible in this season, and you have to say it was effective considering the talent level on the squad and what people like myself predicted early on. I was like, this looks like the worst team in basketball.
It does.
They,
Yeah, it
they
did.
look awful.
And then adding Rose and Taj Gibson did not make me excited, but that
No.
really worked out for them.
It worked out. Rose played really well in the playoffs.
Taj was
So-
awesome.
So maybe if you're someone like Kawhi Leonard, this is totally speculative and just feeding into like
Hey, this is out
annoying
there.
stuff.
Yeah.
But what if Kawhi's like, you know what? I don't really like playing with Paul George. I don't know what I'm going to do with this Clippers team. I don't know what our next move is.
I'm the mayor of Easttown too, just like grim reapering my way through the NBA town.
Considering what Kawhi has always done, he has to leave the Clippers in flaming ashes at some point,
Yeah. Oh my God,
so
the
he can come and do
Clippers
the
are so
same to the
screwed.
Knicks.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Clippers are kind of maligned too much. The joy people take in their failure is real, but he's not. He has a lot of miles on those feet, on those legs. He's still an amazing player, and he's not that old. But like, do I want him on the Knicks? Like, yeah, he's gonna make that team better. He's still a top 10 guy, but as you said, I'm a process dude, so I love. I hate winning now. It just like my personality just lends itself to like canning vegetables and like saving half sandwiches, you know. And I think the Knicks
You
have done
enjoy
that.
the thrill of defeat.
I enjoy the thrill of tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, because I don't think they were defeated this year. I think if we were going to give up the dream of Cade Cunningham, this was a great outcome. I was very happy. We got some fun times with this team for months,
Lovable team.
beaming with excitement, you know, and people. I love the jokes. I love the enthusiasm. It was awesome. Other than the Jeter respect crew, the Jeter boys, but what I want them to do is kind of re-sign some of these great players that they found, like Nerlens Noel, who's going to need money. I don't care about Derrick Rose or Taj Gibson, but if they're affordable, absolutely. Don't reward them for their performance. Like, give them just enough to sign some real help. And I don't think Rashawn Holmes is a good fit, but he's available. Depends on what they want to do with Mitch Robinson. I think they should re-up him too, but injuries are real. They have a lot of moves to make, and it's going to be exciting. I think Emmanuel Quickley is going to be like one of our favorite players.
I mean, I could very much see the Knicks going out and getting, I don't know, Lowry and DeRozan or something.
Absolutely, right? Like this is, but the Knicks have been removed from this for a while, aside from Derrick Rose, who was cheap. The Knicks haven't really done this. This team is full of young players that they haven't traded away. Like Ntilikina and Knox are still on the bench, which is like awesome. I just really enjoy that because they still have a little bit of value come draft time. We could get into the lottery maybe like 14 or something.
Right. I mean, look, the Knicks might just go and re-sign Tim Hardaway Jr. for the third time and say, we want him back. He's the kind of shooter we need. Bring him
Depends
back
on
to
how
New
much
York.
it costs. I don't even hate him. Depends on how much it costs, right?
Oh, this isn't me saying don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kind of moves that I could see them making. Adding
Tips, yeah.
one guy who fits a clear need. We need one other guy who can shoot. We need one other guy who can handle the ball a little bit and play some defense at point of attack. Whatever. Just fill the roles by spending $15 million on somebody. And then, as you said, play your young guys, get some bit role players, and kind of run the season back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, try to be the 4 seed again. Try to be the 5 seed.
Yeah, I agree. You don't want to let go of a lot of these players. Like, you don't want Nerlens Noel to walk. This is not a culture thing. This is a personnel thing. Pay him. And then if a lot of this cap is eaten by, like, investing in the players you currently have, you do that. And I'm happy with, like, if they can manage to finagle a playmaker from somewhere, the team is slightly better, and always keep space open for a Kawhi Leonard.
You know, there's this, kind of fan trend towards being an armchair GM, and we all like doing it. We're sort of
it's
doing it right now.
amazing. It's amazing,
Oh,
yeah.
look at the salary cap. Look at,
I love it. Yeah.
look at whether this player is going to be a restricted free agent, and that's like the hot stove league element of basketball. At the same time, I think sometimes we forget that yes, the Knicks winning this year was not optimal from a team building standpoint. If winning a championship is the only outcome that you find satisfactory from like a mental exercise standpoint, then you say, well, what are we doing? But the Knicks were fun. Everyone was into that team. People were back in the Garden for a playoff series. They lost. That has a value. It's not a
yeah.
wasted season unless you are being so myopic that you can only see this in terms of like asset management and building a roster that can eventually contend with cap space and all that stuff.
And it's a dissipating feeling, right? Because like we won't feel this way next year, but in year one, this is incredible. I would trade this season for Cade Cunningham, obviously, but like this was worth it. Next season, it won't be, and the season after that, it definitely won't be. So like, just living in the moment, a gentleman's sweep is sweet enough,
I agree. And I am with you on a minor victory, and it feels good, but it's fleeting. And what you really want to build is 5-10 years of contention and potentially winning a championship. Like that's the real move. But I cannot undersell like the sensation of the Garden being packed and people rooting for the Knicks in the playoffs and watching their games and wearing incredible Cookies Hoops Knicks related merch everywhere. Like that stuff ruled, and it came at a time that was pretty exciting, especially due to the sort of reemergence from the COVID slumber.
Yep.
And cool timing for the Knicks to be good. And my post-mortem on their season is like, yeah, ultimately they didn't go anywhere. It might have some positive reverberations, but that was a sweet ride.
Talk about a sweet ride. Are the Sixers just beginning, in the middle, or ending their amazing, amazing season?
Well, unless there's been breaking news about Joel Embiid's knee, and I regret that choice of words immediately, I don't know when the Sixers all-star MVP caliber center will return. He landed on his back in Game 3 of their series against Game 4, actually, in their series against the Wizards.
Thought it was a tailbone issue.
And he has had back issues all season. It started when he got kind of fouled by LeBron and knocked to the ground on it. And it turned out, however, that they detected a meniscus tear. They said it was minor, and apparently it may have been there 4 months, so he could have been playing on this thing. So it's unclear if the Sixers are going to call him a wrap for the season, have him get surgery, come back next year, or they're just saying, well, we're up 3-0 against the 8th seed play-in team. Why don't we sit you out, get through this series, get you a full week of rest from Sunday to Sunday, and see if you're good to go in the second round. Or, maybe you won't be, but let's just get you off your leg and hopefully recuperating and see what happens. I don't know where along this spectrum from complete disaster to, optimism this situation actually falls.
Man, I think the Sixers are doing the right thing, assuming that they didn't know about this before and didn't have him playing on a meniscus tear for any amount of time. And I'm unreasonably cautious about these players, even in moments like a win now championship run in the playoffs. I don't see like an ethical way to play your MVP player or any player on a meniscus tear. You have to fix it. It's his life. Like, you don't want him running up and down the court for a minute. There's something wrong with his knee that could get worse.
Meniscus is also a weird one.
Totally.
Because he might have been playing on it. I don't think they knew about it, though. I think he may have had some soreness that was going back to maybe that bruise from before. This all may be related. It's very hard to know.
He looks
I
hurt
don't-
more than healthy all the time.
I would say that after coming back from the injury that kept him out for a large chunk of the second half of the season and ultimately took him out of the MVP race, he hasn't played quite the same. He's lingered more around the perimeter. He's settled for jumpers more frequently. Hasn't been as good on defense, except for in moments like late games, fourth quarters. Well, all of a sudden he kind of looks like himself again, lunging around, blocking shots. But until then, he's kind of been casually giving up layups at times without really contesting them that hard. I just didn't think he looked that great since he came back. And I'm not saying this in like, well, now that we have this information, in retrospect, I just didn't think he looked quite the same.
They were sitting
Since
him a
coming
lot
back.
more too. He was doing damage and then sitting for longer stretches. Yeah, man. I love the Sixers. I love everybody who isn't nuts about Ben Simmons, and I want the Sixers to win it all. I think they're toast. It's just not the year. He's hurt, and there's nothing we can do except just like enjoy the rest of this season.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was just a caveat to get out of the way. Like, I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone does. To me, like, the Sixers can beat the Hawks without
Maybe. Probably.
Embiid.
Probably.
No,
Probably.
but I'm saying can. They can.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're also not unlocking Ben Simmons correctly. I think.
Oh, it's as if there was a blog post that you maybe posted that described exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, you could find that on cookieshoops.com along with incredible merch. But yeah, in that post, I think we've discussed on the show or whatever. This was a couple weeks ago, but it talked about some of the things that Philly is doing and their reluctance to use small ball lineups when Joel was not on the court. And now they're presented with a situation that they have to do it. They have no choice but to play small ball lineups. And there's been a squandered opportunity in discovering which ones are most effective. If you asked me which ones will work, I would say, okay, these guys on the court make sense to me. How much have they played together over the course of the full season? Like 40 possessions. It's just like, I think that would be okay. The numbers say it's workable, but again, it's like a game together in minuscule chunks. Fucking knows. So that was a missed opportunity to try some of these lineups out. But we did see Philly go small for 30 plus minutes in their Game 5 closeout against Washington. I think the most optimistic outlook is the lineup that had Tobias Harris, Danny Green, Seth Curry, Ben Simmons, the four non-Embiid starters. They scored 134 points per 100 possessions last game. Gave up 122. So, like, incredible offense. Gave up a lot of points. Net rating was solid. I'm like, that's intriguing to me. It's a different version of the Sixers than what we've become familiar with. It'll be interesting to see how comfortable Doc Rivers is with a team that goes out there and scores a bunch, but also gives up a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, he may not have much of a choice, and
Oh, his hands are tied on this one.
yeah, he almost has to do this because Dwight Howard is not the answer. He could be enough to get past the Hawks. The outcome of this Hawks series without Embiid is, like you said, I don't know. If the Hawks 1-6, I wouldn't be surprised. Joel Embiid is hurt. If the Sixers 1-6 without Embiid, I'm like, well, Ben Simmons is one of the top 10 players in the league. And he's been used correctly, like Cookies Hoop says in their blog. But I don't know, man. I don't know. And it's just a really disappointing outcome, but also fascinating to see Ben Simmons unlocked if they are willing to do that.
I mean, one thing I thought was really interesting last game, as much as we have roasted the Simmons and Howard combo, that Doc has stubbornly kept wheeling out there, sometimes it works.
Yeah. Oh,
Sometimes you play well, even with lineups that are unideal. And that happened last night. And all you can do is like, hey, Doc, you threw that lineup out there that I would have been reluctant to use. And they played 9 minutes together. They had an offensive rating of 105, which is kind of bad. As we said, that's like what the Knicks were doing for the whole series against Atlanta. But they only gave up 76 points per 100 possessions and annihilated the Wizards during those 9 minutes. You just don't know how things are going to play out.
Yeah, because it's the Wizards, and it's really hard to tell because that team is very mercurial too, right? On one given night, they're a really devastatingly offensive team, and another night they just can't hit shots. So we don't know that much going into round 2 with the Sixers.
Yeah, there was all the controversy about Ben Simmons being intentionally fouled by the Wizards. The Wizards coach,
Game
Scott
on.
Brooks,
Fun.
using it as like a psychological cudgel.
Yeah.
And Philly fans losing their fucking minds, going absolutely crazy, peeing their pants, pooping their pants, just totally bonkers because Ben Simmons went 4 of 8 and was intentionally fouled. Like 4 of 8, 50%, like a point per possession. That was better. That was the Sixers' best offense that game.
It's tough though, to put my brain in that insanity. I'm like, I love Ben Simmons, obviously. I think he's a top 10 NBA, all NBA player, the best defensive player in the league, maybe the best passer in the league. He had a really weird series where I'm just like, okay, he's just missing all these free throws and it's really odd and I'm not going to look away. I'm going to look right at it. 0 for 6 sucks, but it doesn't make him a worse player. So I feel like we get confused being like disappointed and frustrated in a Julius Randle and being like, is he a Robin or even an Alfred? I'm like, these are the wrong thoughts to have.
Well, it's
He's
also
having a bad time.
It's just the optics too.
Yeah.
Ben Simmons for his career shoots 60% roughly. He shoots 60% in the regular season. He shoots 60% in the postseason. He's roughly a 60% foul shooter. That's what it is. But when people watch him miss 9 in a row, like, see, he can't shoot foul shots. I knew shooting was an issue. I knew it. I told you. It's like, he's a 60% foul shooter. It is what it is. He may have missed 9 in a row, but he is a 60% foul shooter. So I did think it was kind of funny that when Scott Brooks, that diabolical, evil, psychological psyop genius, stoops to this pathetic scheme, and Simmons goes 7 of 12, 60%.
Yeah.
Just went and shot exactly what he has shot more or less his entire career on average, but did it over 12 shots.
But it certainly does feel, and I agree with you, but it does feel when he goes 0 for 9 and we're making excuses, like we're doing the mental gymnastics. Like he went 0 for 9. And we can roast him for that. It's fine.
But my thing are, what are the excuses? That's always my thing. We all know he's a bad foul shooter. What's the issue? But we know he's a 60% foul shooter.
I mean, but in that is like a backflip on a map, right? If someone's like, yo, he missed all 6 free throws, that's bad, and they lost or they won. But he missed all 6 free throws, and that's really bad. And us being like, well, actually, it's not as bad as you think. That's the mental gymnastics.
Oh, see, I disagree because that's not how I think about basketball at all. When J.J. Redick, who's a great 3-point shooter, goes 0 of 8 from 3, of course we know that's bad, but it is what it is. Like I never get mad about guys missing shots. I can't do it. I don't care about foul shots. I don't care about jumpers. I don't care about anything. It just does not bother me if guys miss shots. Oh, Tobias Harris went out and shot 0 of 15 from 3. He sucks. I'm like, tough day at the office.
I mean, half of us didn't give Randall that credit 15 minutes ago, right? Unless,
I actually thought that Randall, I didn't care about Randall shooting in that either. Like, I think Randall takes bad shots all season, and he made a lot of them. I was mostly just making fun of his, getting glitchy out there.
And, as a Randall Day 1 now, as a Randall Day 7, and as a Knicks Day 1, I'm like, yo, I can accept that he sucked. LOL, roast him. I love him. max him out. I'm okay with him. That to me is like the tougher way to deal with it, because the easiest way for me to do something like a Randall thing would be like, not easy, but a way to do it would be like, well, he's actually good and he's just, they're not doing the right things. I'm just like, yeah, he kind of like, it was really bad for a week. And Simmons was actually good this series.
I mean,
he
Simmons
almost
was-
averaged triple-double, right?
Simmons was phenomenal this
Yeah.
series. He was
Yeah.
he was outstanding,
He missed a
I thought-
triple-double by one assist, or a fraction of an assist.
and he had a lousy game 4 because the Sixers underuse him in the half court, in my opinion. He just doesn't get the ball. He doesn't get touches. He doesn't get ISO opportunities. He doesn't get looks at the basket. He doesn't get chances to create. But when the Sixers defense is popping and they're getting a lot of turnovers and they're getting a lot of rebounds and they get out and run, that was when he generated, 42 points
Yeah.
in like game 3 or whatever it was. Like he just created almost 50 points of offense individually, despite not scoring much. I guess it was game 2.
Yeah. And
But-
I
No, but my point is, I don't defend missing foul shots. Of course it sucks. We're not children. Like, we know going 0 of 9 to start that series is bad foul shooting.
Not good.
My thing is that, like, bad foul shooters are bad from the line. That's how it works.
Yeah. I mean, 0 is different than 60, but he recovered. He bounced back. It was funny, like I was not worried about Ben Simmons, but I was like, yo, man, like he's 0 for 9. That's wild. But he's exactly the player he is. And like I always ask what we learned from previous playoff series. Like, what do we learn from basketball history? And all these tunes about the game slowing down in the playoffs, and some grill masters might say, well, Simmons is exposed yet again. But like, you have Doc as a new coach, and he's adjusting to these new players and his new team. And we learned from the Warriors that you can use these players in right ways. Like, in the wrong hands, Draymond Green is a worse player than in the right hands. And it's a world of difference. It could mean a championship or a first-round exit.
I agree. And, like, you can use Ben Simmons as the fulcrum of your offensive attack, and he's an MVP caliber talent. You can use him as Brandon Bass and have him set screens and roll the basket and stand in the dunker spot, and he looks like a journeyman in that role. Like, you can have either one. You can do whatever you want. You can use him one way and get a superstar. You can use him another and see glimpses of that brilliance.
And this is not unique to Ben Simmons. Every player in the league can be marginalized by a bad scheme.
Yeah, but he is, because of his lack of shooting and his lack of sort of traditional post game, he is uniquely susceptible to surrounding personnel and to offensive strategy. There are plug and play guys like Jason Tatum who are popular because of that aspect. You can just dump him anywhere and he'll go do his little jab steps, he'll do his spin moves, he'll hit some threes, he'll do his Euro step to the hoop, and you'll be like, wow, look at all these things he can do. He can do those for any team. Doesn't matter. You don't need to put other personnel around him. You don't need to, put him into this ideal ecosystem in which he will thrive. But the high end of Simmons, to me, is so much loftier than those kind of guys, than the Paul Georges and the Jason Tatums. Like, he gives you things that are not replicable. There is not another guy in the league besides like LeBron James who can do some of the things and Giannis who can do physically some of the stuff that he can do. So, I mean, look, I don't need to get into commendations of Ben Simmons and his weirdness as a player. Just to say, if he was unleashed properly, I think the Sixers are fine against Atlanta. If they use him like they did for 3/4 of Game 5, and they've shown no indication that they're willing to go into like a spread floor, Simmons at the top of the key, and let him just dictate the entire offense, I think they're in trouble. That's my major take on that.
Without Joe, yeah. Well, it's gonna be wild. I hate to be that guy, the Seinfeld guy, but
You
it's gonna
are
be
that guy,
crazy.
aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait to see what we've been waiting for Doc's response to this exact scenario all season, and we get to see it.
I thought he did a good job.
Yeah.
I don't like how he is deploying Simmons in the half court at all, but I do think his rotations and his willingness to let Maxey get burned, to figure out how to get some viable minutes out of Dwight and Ben as a pairing. I thought they hunted mismatches against smaller guards like Neto and Ish Smith and exploited those for easy buckets. I thought Doc did a good job in Game 5.
Yeah.
Nothing but praise for him.
Demolish the weaknesses of the Wizards team, and he did.
Yeah. You know what we do? We demolish the weaknesses of imperfect pods.
Yeah, we again succeeded in creating another perfect pod.
And, we'll record another one. It'll be better. But for now, this is the perfect pod.
Impossible, but I'm leaving the window open for it.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.